and this will be bringing us up to a total of 12 minutes. You can see that it's forming a smooth film over the side of it, and the dough actually has a rather smooth and satiny appearance. It's not real rough or curdled looking as it was earlier. The color has also changed too. It looks to be brighter. The color itself hasn't changed. It's just that that smooth skin is reflecting light away from the dough, so it has a brighter appearance to it. Here we are. We're at 12 minutes total mixing time now. And we're going to reach in and take a piece of the dough out. And we're going to form it into a ball. Place it between our fingers, lock it down with our thumbs, pull it apart. No tearing. So this dough here can now be stretched and formed into a ball without tearing. It's not going to stick to everything. It should be clean coming off of our fingers. You can see here it's not sticking to anything anymore. But we're not quite through yet. Right now, if we were to try to take this out of the bowl, we'd literally have to dig it out. We'd be fighting it. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the dough, or run the mixer at low speed, and we're going to pour just a little bit of oil, very, very small amount of oil, right down the side of the bowl, so it gets mixed between the bowl and the dough ball. This will lubricate the dough ball, so it'll be easier to remove from the bowl. So we're going to reset our speed at speed number 1, and we're just going to start the mixer. And I'm not pouring it down the chute. Because I need to pour it right along the edge of the bowl. So I need to pour it off on the side here. And just pour it in a little stream. We don't need much. Generally an ounce or so is all that you need. If you overmix it, you mix it in, you've lost the lubricating effect. It's not going to come out the same way. Lay the bowl down first. Check our dough temperature. We had targeted this dough for between 80 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. We're at 82 degrees Fahrenheit right now. So we're definitely within the sweet spot of between 80 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit.
One of the new features on the Legacy mixer, and it's just as simple as pulling out a little button, and that agitator comes off. So that makes it a lot easier. So we'll get this out of the bowl, and then we will lift the bowl back up just a little bit before we put it onto the bowl. And one other thing that you need to be sure and do is detach the bowl from the one side before bringing it down onto the bowl dolly. That's another nice thing as far as the new features on the Legacy mixer is the ease at which you can get the bowl on and off the what we refer to as the saddle of the mixer.
Here we've got our dough tossed up on a workbench, and we're ready to start dividing it into individual pieces, cutting and scaling, that's what we call it. So the easiest way to do this is simply cut the dough into strips. It takes just a minute to do this, but it pays back big dividends. And all I need to do is estimate how big of a piece to cut, because it's all about the same size, to give me the target weight of 11 ounces. It'd be about the heaviest you'd want to use for a 12-inch. It'd be a little bit more appropriate for about a 14-inch.
There's a lot of different ways that you can round a dough ball up. One way is you can use 2 hands and grab the dough piece and just start tucking the bottom of the piece onto itself underneath and round it up that way. Another way is to take your rough cut piece and start to bring in what we might call our rough edges all into the center. Take that dough piece and flip it, and then we're going to use the heel of our hand kind of as a blade, and we're going to attach all of these tails that we've put on the bottom. Now I really don't bend my hand at all. What I'm really doing is I'm using my hand as a blade, and I'm pushing it into the bench, and then I pick the dough piece up, keeping that smooth side up, and bring it back towards me. And you do that probably about 3-4 times, and before you know it, you've got a nice round dough piece. When you get good, you actually are going to do 2 dough balls at the same time, taking your dough piece, flattening out a little bit, bringing in those rough tails, flipping it upside down, using the heels of your hands to press the dough piece into the bench. If the dough piece starts sliding across the bench, again, just take a little bit of water and mist the bench lightly. Flatten it out, bring the dough tails in, flip it over, get that smooth side up, using the heels of our hands, pressing them into the bench. And we have our plastic dough boxes, so we'll get a dozen dough pieces in here. At this point here, they all pretty much stay nice and stationary, because we like to put a little bit of oil on top of the dough ball itself, so that when it is sitting in the cooler for about a period of 45 minutes to an hour and a half, that it doesn't skin over too much. We could very easily just put less dough pieces in here if we were doing something a little bit heavier for, say, a deep dish pizza. And that's the nice thing about that oil that we put on them, is that they won't stick together, that they'll separate very easily. Again, the oil that we're using in this case is not an olive oil. You don't need to use an expensive oil for the purposes of oiling the dough ball. We're going to allow probably 8 to 12 hours of fermentation on this. What we prefer is an overnight method, and we want to slow down the yeast activity. And so by cross-stacking them and then putting them into the cooler for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, we're going to allow the cold air to get in there, and we're going to slow that yeast down. But we want to control the rate of fermentation. You can see that already in that the dough is starting to gas a little bit, and that's why we go for a certain desired dough temperature, because we do want the yeast to start working a little bit. When you mix a dough, probably give it at least 2 hours of time to rest, relax, and get a little bit of fermentation on it. All right, so we have our dough boxes cross-stacked, and we're going to take these to the cooler, and then you'll have to have an empty dough box to function as a lid. It's just a simple system of attaching some casters to the bottom of one of the boxes, and that serves as your dollar. And we're going to take this to the cooler now. Obviously, we don't want to be any lower than probably 32 degrees or our dough will freeze. So we're going to be at probably about 38 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit is where our retarder or cooler temperature is going to be. And then we're going to just leave these in here for, again, about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, but we will still be getting fermentation. We're not going to stop yeast activity, we're just going to slow it down. And then we're going to let this dough sit overnight, and then probably the best is somewhere between 8 and 12 hours, and then you'll have a nice dough piece to work with. Pull out the amount that you'll need and allow it to warm up a little bit at room temperature. Using cold dough right out of the cooler will result in a higher incidence of blistering as you bake the pizza. So now we've allowed 45 minutes to an hour and a half to go by, and we need to get our dough boxes stacked on top of themselves. And one of the things that we like to do is the last ones that were divided, we want to get those on the bottom of the stack versus the first ones that were divided. We want to get those towards the top of the stack. And then you'll just allow this to stay in the cooler overnight. That dough piece will tend to dry out. And that's one of the things why we put the oil on it, so that when we are in here for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, that dough piece doesn't dry out too much. We can leave this actually in here for up to a period of about 3 days, keeping it under refrigeration. And pulling dough pieces out as we would need them. Pull out the amount of dough that we would want to work with, allow them to come up in temperature about 1 hour, and then we could work out of using that dough for probably about the next 3 hours. We could have just allowed these to sit at room temperature and allow those to sit for about 2 hours, and we could use those then. But we find that in the cooler, probably a minimum of 8 hours.